Brought to you by Penguin.
The Man Who Changed the Way We Read by Jeremy Lewis, read by Steve John Shepherd. Prologue. Cyril Connolly once wrote that no two biographies are alike, for in every one enters an element of autobiography which must always be different. And this is no exception to his rule. Penguin Books was 7 years old when I was born. I remember them all through my childhood, and since I have spent my entire working life in the publishing and literary world, Alan Lane and his colleagues have a certain familiarity. Writing about the years in which Penguin established itself as a national institution has been like revisiting a dimly remembered country, long gone but still familiar. And although I never met Lane, many of the figures who flit through these pages were known to me, by reputation or in person, from my early days in the publishing business. As a second-generation Penguin reader, I looked out every month to see what new books were on offer, assumed that the only novels worth reading were those that had been paperbacked by Penguin in its famous livery of orange and white, and automatically turned to the blue-backed pelicans if I wanted to know about the ancient Greeks, the Hanoverians, the Roman Catholic Church, printing, Karl Marx, or even the weather. For those of us who grew up in the 50s and 60s, Penguin seemed to be one of the benign monopolies that shaped our lives, along with the BBC and the National Health Service, a unique, unchanging institution, without rivals or compare. Quite who was responsible for it all, and how it had come into being, was a matter of complete indifference to me. The Penguin edition of Lady Chatterley's Lover was put on trial the year after I left school, but I remember nothing of it. And even when 7 years later I went to work in the publicity department at Collins, the name of Alan Lane meant nothing to me. In those days, publishers were still newsworthy, and the colour supplements regularly carried admiring profiles of the two whiz-kids of the book trade, Tom Mashler and Tony Godwin, both of whom, as it happened, had worked for Alan Lane. But although Lane had had more column inches devoted to his achievements than any other publisher, most recently for sacking Tony Godwin, he was tired and ill by the time I began to learn my way around the publishing world, revered by his fellow practitioners but less in evidence to the world at large than such colourful figures as George Weidenfeld or André Deutsch. Like a good many other people, I assumed, wrongly, that he had invented the paperback. But since I knew next to nothing about him, I had no reason to think otherwise. I remember nothing of his death in 1970, but the previous year I had gone to work as a junior editor at André Deutsch. Among my colleagues was a young man named David Teal, who was married to Lane's second daughter, Christine, and was gaining some experience of hardback publishing before returning to Penguin. As André Deutsch liked to remind us, his firm had been chosen for the honour, and since his professionalism and dedication to publishing equalled Alan Lane's, this made perfect sense. My wife and I went to dinner with the Teals in their flat in the old Mill House, Alan Lane's elegant 18th-century house in West Drayton. And since then I've often wondered whether Lane himself might have been on the premises. Soon afterwards we went our separate ways, and I thought no more about David Teal until André Deutsch's 80th birthday party in 1997, when a genial figure tapped me on the shoulder and reintroduced himself. The publishing world which I joined in 1967 was that in which Alan Lane had spent his working life. Although some mergers and takeovers had occurred, most firms were still independent. Many, like Collins and John Murray, were still family firms. Others, like André Deutsch or Weidenfeld and Nicholson, were run by their founders. Publishing offices were, as often as not, rickety Georgian houses in Bloomsbury or Covent Garden. Their entrance halls were invariably clogged with brown paper parcels, while the offices upstairs combined elegance and squalor. Marble mantelpieces cluttered with dog-eared show cards and...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?